Well, this week, Nima, was explosive in many senses because of this high-level Pakistani delegation visit to Tehran, which lasted not only one day, but a day and a half. In fact, a day and a half and until late afternoon of the second day, Monday and Tuesday. So it was led by a Munir, Field Marshal, head of the army. He talked to everybody, and the delegation talked to everybody, which is very, very important. This means the civilian leadership, the military leadership, and also they talked directly with Mohsen Rezai, the number 2 man in Tehran, special representative, personal representative of leader Mojtaba Khamenei, and secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. We got excellent information from our Pakistani mediation sources and from one of our sources, which sits at the tight circle, let's say the mini cabinet of Mojtaba Khamenei. So the great thing, Larry and I and the channel that we are working on, Transition Protocol, is that we have access to the top of the Pakistani leadership and also to the top of the Iranian leadership. So this is immensely precious. And we had messages that they support what we are doing, that they will continue to pass top-level information to us. And this is very important because they see that we are treating the information with the utmost seriousness. And of course, we basically try to explain to our audience, which is growing very, very fast, how does a high-level mediation diplomatic process in one of the most intractable issues of the 21st century, if not the most intractable of them all, how does it work? The back and forth, who talks to whom, how things may be distorted, what is lost in translation, the pressures, the underground pressures, the obvious pressures, etc. This trip was immensely important because Trump personally asked Munir to go to Tehran. That's why it's so important. He called Munir and said, look, go to Tehran, get the Iranians back on the negotiating table, try to get anything that doesn't make me look really, really bad. That's the very difficult part of the brief. No? So, and this after Trump himself had demoted the Pakistanis for a few days, saying that they were not the main mediators anymore. But obviously, it had to be because they're going to rely on whom? On the Qataris. The Qataris don't have weight for this kind of stuff. The Qatar is about money. And this is what today, as we speak, today, Thursday, the Prime Minister of Qatar and the Foreign Minister are discussing the modalities of, remember those famous $6 billion in Qatari banks? Finally, they're discussing how to finally send the $6 billion to Tehran as part of a new agreement. This new agreement, Nima, well, that's very, very complicated. We could build it as the resuscitation for the zillionth time of the MOU dead cat. It is, essentially. And with the Iranians saying the same thing. If the Americans start to respect what they signed in the MOU, we go back to the negotiating table and we can have a period of 60 days to 90 days of serious discussions. But first, we expect action from Washington. The problem is that Trump wants, and that's the title of my latest column, Trump wants an exit that he doesn't have to call an exit. Or it doesn't sound like a negative exit on his side. That means he needs to sell the exits as some sort of victory. So that makes the role of the mediators practically impossible, but they are trying. Because this is what Munir was trying to explain to Iran. Okay, look, we understand that you don't trust the Americans because after all, they blew up the MOU. And now we are here asking you to come back to a negotiation. So what they are trying to arrange since Monday, in fact, is to have some sort of draft document that could later be signed by both sides, Washington and Tehran, with a mini roadmap that can be, let's say, supervised by the mediators and followed by the mediators. Concession on one side, concession on the other side. So then things start moving. The problem is the Americans want the Iranians to start. And you know, Nima, probably better than anybody, that if Iran makes a serious concession, the Americans may just take it and don't do anything to reciprocate. So this has to be very, very clear if there is a return to negotiations.
They remember JCPOA. Sorry for interrupting.
They remember everything, Anima. They remember the JCPOA and they remember the MOU. Exactly. And they remember that they have been attacked in the middle of negotiations. So for this to happen, you have to be two serious moves simultaneous by both sides. So this is what is being discussed this week. In fact, as we speak now, it has to involve like a temporary mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz, the end of the naval blockade, but at the same time, the Americans have to start sanctions relief, somewhat, at least some sanctions, and start to give Iran its money back, which could be, the start could be what the Qataris are discussing today, the $6 billion, which it was on the way 2 months ago, and then the Americans blocked it. The Treasury, U.S. Treasury blocked it. So this is where we are. We can say that this is the 1 millionth time that they are trying to resuscitate a diplomatic process. The only difference compared to the previous one is that Trump badly needs an exit, an off-ramp, badly. And the Iranians know it, and the Iranians, if they could sit calmly on their beautiful chairs in front of their beautiful silk comb Persian carpets and wait for a little over 2 months when the midterms will come and Trump will be destroyed in the midterms. This is one possibility. The other possibility, if there is some diplomacy, they are going to extract the maximum of what is already contained in the 14 points of the MOU. So this is where we are this week. This week is very important because everybody is waiting for some signals, or at least one major signal, especially coming from Washington between today, Thursday, and Friday. Nothing happens during the weekend, as we all know. But if there is one signal that can be interpreted as, let's say, diplomatically coming from Washington, Tehran is not going to say no. So then we start a process. So this is what basically what the Pakistanis were trying to sell in Tehran. And when we heard some of the comments, for instance, the office of Pezeshkian said that the discussions were very productive. And Pezeshkian himself said, yes, maybe the war is coming to an end. That was a little bit over the top, right? So this means that the discussions are very, very serious. Civilian leadership in Tehran believes that this may be possible. We still don't know what Mohsen Rezai himself thinks about all that. He hasn't said anything specific about what was discussed Monday and Tuesday in Tehran with the Pakistanis. But once again, Nima, is the proverbial little tiny window of opportunity. Nah? If this doesn't work, Nima, we all know there will be a return to war. Inevitably. The guns are over there, they're loaded, they may be resting for a while, but that's it. If there's no diplomacy, that's it. The Americans are going to try something absolutely stupid and foolish, even with the deadlines, even with the global economic crisis literally knocking on everyone's door. The crisis already inside the American economy, and of course the disaster of the midterms.
Did they talk about the case of Lebanon in the visit? That
It's inbuilt in the paragraph 1 of the MOU, Nima, the end of all wars. And here we get to the major spoilers of everything that is being discussed. How are they going to, how the Americans are going to convince the death cult not to do any, not only not to do anything in Palestine and in Lebanon, but to stop what they're doing in Palestine and in Lebanon. We know this is absolutely impossible, right? And obviously, when you hear from, especially the military leadership in Tehran, is Palestine will never abdicate our struggle for Palestine. And end of all wars means not only against the axis of resistance, means against Gaza and the West Bank. So there you go. Right from the start, you have a major stumbling block. And that would be not Trump himself, because he's basically a messenger. The people behind him telling Tel Aviv, back off, because it's our own national interest in U.S. to end with this war, because this is a major disaster, not only for us, but for a lot of people, including our allies, vassals, etc. And our allies and vassals are begging us to end this war. And that, everybody gets in. Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Nobody wants this to go on. But the only ones who have a mechanism are the Pakistanis, because they are talking directly with the President of the United States, who needs this exit that he cannot call an exit. It is immensely complicated. All of us agree. But at least this week, there's once again, a little bit of hope. We don't know how long this is going to last. It depends on a first signal that, okay, let's try to bet on diplomacy for a change, right?
I think the problem for Donald Trump right now is that none of these countries in the Persian Gulf, Pakistan, are happy about the Operation Economic Outcast, because they know that it means that the endless suffering for everybody in the region is not going to be the suffering of Iranian government or Iranian people.
Yes.
The suffering comes to the region, would influence the whole region altogether. Yesterday we learned 96% of LNG export of Qatar was somehow neutralized, was removed from their calculation, from their economy. This is not something to be ignored for Qatar, and that's why, in my opinion, today Qatar is in Iran talking with Iranians. And there were some initial reports from that meeting. It says that Iran and Qatar have reportedly agreed to jointly remove mines in the Strait of Hormuz, according to the Qatari foreign minister's statement. So Donald Trump said yesterday, that the day before, said there are no mines. All mines were removed from the Strait of Hormuz. There is nothing that if Iran gets back to put them back in the Strait, we're going to hit them. We're going to hit them hard.